You have been bleeding power your entire life, and you never even noticed the wound. Every time you explain your actions to those committed to misunderstanding you, every time you react to unprovoked disrespect, you hand your crown to beggars. Weak men surrender their energy in a desperate, unending plea for validation. Powerful men weaponize the void. They know that attention is the ultimate currency, and giving it away freely makes you nothing more than a puppet. 500 years ago, Machiavelli mastered the precise psychological mechanism to render enemies completely powerless without lifting a single finger. Today, you claim that society feeds you a massive psychological lie. They tell you that communication is the ultimate key to every problem. They preach that if you just talk it out, if you just explain your perspective clearly enough, the other person will finally understand and respect you. This is a devastating trap designed entirely to keep you docile and subservient. Over-communication is never clarity. Over-communication is absolute submission. Every time you rush to explain your actions, you instantly hand over your authority. You take the crown from your own head and place the other person on a pedestal, presenting yourself purely for their judgment. Weak men beg for attention. Strong men weaponize its absence. Picture a desperate beggar standing in the mud outside the iron gates of a massive fortress. He shouts through the bars. He pleads. He offers endless reasons why he deserves to be let inside. He explains his hunger, his cold, his righteous claim to the warmth of the castle. The king sitting on the throne inside does not answer. The king does not walk down to the gates to debate the beggar's merits. The king simply exists in absolute, unshakable silence. You become that exact beggar every single time you over-explain yourself to someone who disrespects you. You are standing outside their mental gates, begging for a pathetic scrap of validation. You are desperately asking them to bless your reality. A true sovereign never asks for permission to exist. A sovereign dictates reality completely by simply occupying space. Look at the exact mechanics of what happens inside your mind when you offer an unprompted explanation. You are subconsciously signaling profound guilt. You are projecting massive insecurity. You are telling the world that your actions are not strong enough to stand on their own merits. You believe you need a wall of words to prop them up. The very second you start defending your choices to a person who has absolutely no right to question them, you have already lost the psychological battle. You have stepped entirely into their frame. You are playing their game, governed by their rules. They will pick apart your words. They will find microscopic flaws in your logic. They will twist your own desperate explanations and use them as ammunition to destroy you. The man who chases loses. The man who withdraws conquers. Now, observe the absolute, terrifying power of withholding. When someone challenges your boundaries, and you simply look back at them with a dead, unblinking stare, the power dynamic shatters and rebuilds instantly in your favor. You create a suffocating psychological vacuum. Human nature completely despises a void. They will immediately scramble to fill it. They will start over-explaining themselves. They will frantically doubt their initial challenge. By doing absolutely nothing, you force them completely into the submissive role. You turn them into the beggar at the gate. You do not react. You respond only with nothingness. You do not explain. You let them drown completely in the cold silence you just created. Machiavelli understood perfectly that constant accessibility breeds absolute contempt. If people know exactly what you are thinking at all times, you become entirely predictable. If you are predictable, you are easily controlled. You become nothing more than a cheap pawn on their chessboard, moved around by their whims. By completely withdrawing your explanations, you become a ghost. You become entirely untouchable. They cannot attack what they cannot understand. They cannot manipulate a mind that absolutely refuses to reveal its cards. Silence is never an absence of noise. Silence is an active, ruthless weapon of mass psychological destruction. It completely starves the ego of your enemies. It forces them to consume themselves in the fire of their own baseless assumptions. You must violently kill the desperate, lingering need to be understood. It is a pathetic disease held over from a childhood where you had to constantly justify your existence to authority figures to survive. You are the ultimate authority now. You owe absolutely no one a glimpse into your rationale. Let them completely misunderstand you. Let them craft wild, obsessive theories about your hidden motives. Let them burn all their mental energy trying desperately to decode your absolute silence. Your peace and your empire do not depend on their comprehension. Words are the covering of the weak. Silence is the armor of kings. Let me show you exactly what happens inside the mind of the person you completely ignore. When you actively deploy silence, you do not just remove your presence, you create a terrifying, suffocating psychological vacuum. The human ego is a fragile, desperate machine that requires constant feedback to survive. It needs friction. It needs an opposing force to validate its own strength. It needs a reaction to confirm its own existence. When you deny an attacker that friction, you strip them of their reality entirely. You do not just defeat them, you cast them directly into a brutal, unending psychological limbo. Understand this core vulnerability of the human brain. It cannot process absolute emptiness. When confronted with a void, the mind will frantically attempt to fill it with its own worst fears. If you fight back, you give them a tangible target. If you explain yourself, you give them a logical foundation to attack. But if you give them absolutely nothing, their own mind turns entirely against them. They become their own ruthless torturer. You force them to fight a ghost, and no matter how strong they think they are, they can never defeat a ghost. This is where the absolute collapse begins. Because you offered no response, their brain must invent 1,000 terrifying reasons why. Watch their paranoid disintegration. They will wake up in the middle of the night wondering what you know. They will stare at the ceiling, analyzing the exact weight of your silence. They will craft desperate, probing messages that they type out and erase 100 times. They will rehearse imaginary conversations in the mirror, begging for a resolution that you will never provide. They will replay every single interaction you ever had, searching frantically for a hidden meaning. They will question their own sanity. They will completely unravel. This is the ultimate mastery of dark social dynamics. You are not lifting a single finger. You are not spending a single drop of your own emotional energy. You are weaponizing their own deep-seated insecurity against them. The less you do, the more completely they obsess over you. You occupy their thoughts entirely by refusing to occupy their physical space. They thought they were attacking a mortal who would bleed when cut. They realize too late they have struck an unfeeling stone wall, and the absolute silence echoing back at them is entirely deafening. Weak men believe power must be loud. They think dominance requires aggression, volume, and relentless striking. That is the pathetic mentality of a foot soldier destined to die early on the front lines. The sovereign operates entirely differently. The king does not scream to prove his authority. The king simply withdraws his gaze. When you remove your attention, you remove their oxygen. You leave them gasping for air in a room they arrogantly thought they controlled. They will eventually become so desperate for a resolution, so starved for your reaction, that they will break all of their own rules. They will double text. They will send erratic emotional outbursts. They will attempt to provoke you with targeted insults just to get any sign of life. Any pathetic scrap of acknowledgement to prove they still matter to you. And when they do, you will remain entirely unmoved. You will look right through them as if they are a pane of glass. You will let their emotional chaos crash against the impregnable shores of your absolute indifference. By withholding your reaction, you steal their script completely. You force them to play a frantic solo game on an empty chessboard. They will move their pieces desperately, waiting for a counterattack that never arrives, until they eventually knock over their own king in sheer madness. This is how you conquer an enemy entirely from the shadows. You do not argue. You do not stoop to their miserable level of engagement. You elevate yourself into an unreachable stratosphere, leaving them totally trapped in the dirt. The greatest punishment is not revenge. The greatest punishment is irrelevance. Society constantly confuses leaving with losing. They operate under the pathetic delusion that stepping back from a conflict means you are running away in fear. This is a lie constructed by the weak to keep you trapped in their miserable games. You must fundamentally separate a frantic escape from a cold, calculated strategic withdrawal. Running away is an emotional reaction driven entirely by panic. It shows the enemy they have successfully breached your defenses. Strategic withdrawal is a brutal assertion of absolute control. When a weak man flees, he constantly looks over his shoulder, desperate to see if he is being chased. When a king executes a strategic withdrawal, he knows the entire battlefield must immediately readjust to the massive void he just created. You never abandon a situation because you are overwhelmed. You withdraw to intentionally starve the environment of its most valuable resource, which is your presence. Human psychology is fundamentally wired to despise what is abundant and obsess over what is absolutely scarce. If your time, your words, and your emotional energy are always available, they become entirely worthless. You become cheap dirt on the ground that anyone feels entitled to step on. You must violently rip your presence away and transform it into an absolute, unattainable luxury. When you remove yourself completely, you create a devastating deficit in their emotional economy. They will suddenly realize the massive, crushing weight of what they just lost. You do not ever demand respect with your words. You simply make your presence so devastatingly rare that unconditional respect becomes the only currency they can afford to pay for it. Machiavelli understood a supreme law of power regarding visibility. A target that is always stationary is a target that is inevitably destroyed. If your enemies know exactly where you are, exactly what you feel, and exactly how you will react, they have already mapped out your total destruction. You must completely shatter their map. The supreme master of dark strategy never allows his opponents to calculate his position. By withdrawing into absolute silence, you blind them entirely. They are left swinging wildly in the dark, wasting all their aggressive energy on shadows. You remain completely hidden, calmly observing their exhausted desperation from a position of absolute high ground. Implementing this requires a brutal, uncompromising discipline. You must completely sever the emotional feeding tube you have been providing them. You do not announce your departure. You do not write a dramatic final message explaining exactly why you are stepping back. Announcements are for the weak who desperately want to be stopped and begged to stay. You simply evaporate. You become completely unresponsive to their escalating provocations. You let their frantic texts sit forever in the void. You let their calculated insults echo into absolute nothingness. You drain the entire interaction of its lifeblood. You teach them with terrifying clarity that access to your mind is a supreme privilege. and it can be revoked permanently without a single word of warning. When you execute a flawless strategic withdrawal, you trigger a primal panic deep within their nervous system. They are deeply addicted to the toxic game, and you just stole the entire board. They will try desperately to pull you back into the dirt. They will use fabricated anger. They will use fake, manipulative apology. They will deploy every psychological trick they have ever learned just to get a pulse from you. You will observe this pathetic display with absolute coldness. You do not reward their tantrum with a reaction. You let them exhaust their entire arsenal against an impregnable wall of silence. Your complete lack of engagement proves definitively that they hold absolutely no power over your reality. You must violently kill the part of your ego that wants to stand there and take their abuse just to prove you are strong enough to endure it. Enduring disrespect is never a display of strength. It is a profound submission. True sovereign power is recognizing that most people are completely unworthy of your battlefield. You do not lower your sword to fight peasants in the mud. You elevate yourself into a dimension they cannot possibly reach, leaving them to fight among themselves. Do not be a stone statue for people to carve their words into. Be a ghost. Completely untouchable. Entirely invulnerable. The world is constantly obsessed with drawing a reaction out of you. They will throw drama directly at your feet, hoping you trip over it. They will manufacture chaos just to see if they can disrupt your peace. They operate under the pathetic belief that if they can make you angry, they own a piece of your soul. You must deny them this completely. You must cultivate a heart of absolute ice. The discipline of apathy is not about being numb or detached from reality. It is about total, ruthless, emotional sovereignty. You are the sole architect of your internal state. And you never hand the blueprint to the enemy. You hold the only key to your emotional vault, and you never let beggars inside. Picture a top-tier general standing on a hill overlooking a brutal, chaotic battlefield. Below him, the mud is soaked with panic. The foot soldiers are screaming, running frantically, and reacting to every single explosion. They are completely consumed by the immediate terror of the noise. The general does not scream. The general does not run down into the mud to fight every minor, irrelevant skirmish. He observes the entire theater of war with an absolutely cold, calculating eye. He knows that reacting to the chaotic noise is a guaranteed death sentence for his entire strategy. You must become that exact general in the battlefield of your own life. You do not descend into the dirt to entertain the chaotic noise of lesser minds. Let the weak exhaust themselves in their endless, manufactured drama. You do not react. You do not flinch when they try to provoke you. You do not raise your voice when they attempt to insult you. You do not defend your character when they try to manipulate your narrative. Reaction is always a massive surrender of power. It shows them exactly where your hidden triggers are. You do not react. You respond only with results. You do not respond with words or pathetic justifications. You let your massive success, your unwavering discipline, and your untouchable elevation be the only absolute answer they ever receive. This requires a brutal, uncompromising execution of your own ego. You must violently kill the pathetic, lingering desire to be validated by people who do not matter. You must crush the part of you that desperately wants to prove them wrong. Proving them wrong requires your energy. It requires your intense focus. It requires you to acknowledge that their worthless opinion holds any weight whatsoever in your reality. You must strip them of that weight entirely. When someone attempts to use reverse psychology or manipulative guilt trips, they are throwing a desperate hook into the dark water. You absolutely refuse to bite. Watch exactly how they shatter when their toxic manipulation hits a brick wall of pure indifference. They will inevitably escalate. They will try to paint you as the villain to anyone who will listen. They will accuse you of being heartless, arrogant, and completely cold. Let them. Their loud accusations are merely the desperate cries of a manipulator losing their entire grip on your reality. Your absolute apathy is the supreme kryptonite to their toxic behavior. By remaining an immovable iceberg in the center of their raging, pathetic storm, you force them to wreck their own ships entirely against your shores. You remain completely intact while they tear themselves apart. You will not engage. You will not explain. You will not apologize for your unbreakable psychological boundaries. You will watch them spin completely out of control, fueled entirely by their own manufactured hysteria. You will look at them with the exact same absolute indifference you give to a dead leaf falling on the ground. You completely neutralize their existence simply by removing your emotional investment. They become a ghost, screaming violently in an empty room, realizing entirely too late that they have absolutely no power to move a single piece of furniture in your mind. True power is never about controlling how other people act. True power is about being so completely in control of yourself that the outside world loses all influence over your trajectory. You starve the enemy entirely by cutting off their supply of your attention. You shatter their fabricated reality by refusing to participate in their illusions. When you completely sever the emotional strings they are desperately trying to pull in, you become a sovereign master of your own destiny. When you need absolutely nothing from anyone, you become the most dangerous person in the room. Theory is entirely useless without brutal execution. You must stop viewing social dynamics as a frantic, emotional boxing ring where whoever screams the loudest wins. The world is a grand, unforgiving chessboard, and you must play it with the terrifying, calculated cunning of the fox and the absolute, unshakable authority of the lion. Most people are nothing more than impulsive, predictable pawns. They react to every minor slight. They rush blindly forward to defend their fragile egos, allowing their opponents to manipulate their every move. To achieve true sovereignty, you must elevate yourself entirely above the board. You do not react to their miserable, chaotic attempts at warfare. You let your absolute silence dictate the terms of the game. You let your massive, undeniable results be your only voice. While they slowly choke on their own irrelevant noise, let us translate this absolute silence into devastating, real-world tactical moves. When a toxic competitor or a manipulative individual attempts to draw you into their chaotic reality, they are desperate for resistance. They want you to argue. They want you to push back, because your resistance proves that they actually matter. You will deny them this completely. You will not block their pathetic strike. You will simply remove the target entirely. By becoming completely unresponsive, their aggressive energy carries them forward until they fall flat on their own face. You watch them stumble. You watch them exhaust all their resources, trying to manipulate a mind that absolutely refuses to engage. You turn the master manipulator into a pathetic puppet, dancing furiously on a stage where the audience has already left the building. This is exactly how you weaponize the void in everyday psychological combat. If they boldly insult your character in public, you become entirely invisible. If they spread malicious, fabricated rumors simply to provoke a reaction, you become entirely invisible. If they openly doubt your capabilities and mock your highest ambitions, you become entirely invisible. If they attempt to guilt-trip you into lowering your ironclad boundaries, you become entirely invisible. You do not offer them a single, desperate syllable of defense. You do not lower your frequency to match their miserable desperation. You entirely starve their toxicity of the oxygen it desperately needs to survive. You let them scream wildly into the abyss, and you let the abyss echo back their own absolute worthlessness. Consider the ultimate test of your sovereignty. When someone you trusted reveals their true, treacherous nature. The weak human instinct is to seek loud, messu, emotional revenge. Weak men want to inflict immediate pain. They demand tearful apologies. They desperately seek closure to heal their wounded pride. You will seek absolutely none of this. Seeking revenge is a massive admission of defeat. It proves they still own a massive, bleeding piece of your mind. You will execute a much darker, much more permanent move. You will entirely delete them from your timeline. You cut off all access instantly, abruptly, and permanently. You do not warn them. You do not grant them the privilege of a final, dramatic conversation. You plunge them instantly into the freezing, cold, dark, leaving them to live with the heavy ghost of their own mistake forever. This level of absolute detachment requires supreme, unbreakable discipline. The weak will call you arrogant. The manipulated will call you heartless. But the reward is complete. Untouchable power over your own destiny. You are no longer frantically reacting to the pieces on the board. You are controlling the entire atmosphere of the game simply by refusing to be moved. They will eventually realize, to their absolute horror, that their attacks meant absolutely nothing to you. They will understand with terrifying clarity that they never even scratched your armor. You do not fight pigs in the mud. You do not waste a single breath explaining your supreme position to those who are determined to drag you down. You do not clear obstacles. You step over them as if they never existed. You are standing at the absolute edge of a shattered reality. The desperate, anxious version of you that constantly begged for validation is entirely dead. That pathetic creature has been violently left behind in the dirt. You have successfully severed every single string they used to control you. You are no longer participating in the miserable, frantic theater of the weak. You have systematically starved your ego of its pathetic need to be understood by people who do not matter. You have completely destroyed the illusion that anyone else holds the authority to judge your existence. You are now the sole, undisputed, sovereign of your own mind. You are no longer a victim of their chaotic emotional storms. You are the unbreakable mountain that the storm breaks against. For years, you handed them the chisel and allowed them to violently carve their own insecurities into your psychology. You allowed them to dictate your worth based on their fleeting, worthless approval. That era is entirely finished. You have completely taken back the chisel. You have erased their pathetic inscriptions. You are rewriting your entire psychological code. You do not flinch. You do not explain. You do not surrender a single inch of your mental territory. This is not a temporary shift in your behavioral strategy. This is a total, irreversible coronation. You are stepping entirely out of the chaotic mud of the masses and taking your rightful place on the throne. The transformation is absolute. When you walk into a room from this moment forward, you do not nervously scan the faces to see if you are accepted. You dictate the exact psychological atmosphere simply by existing within it. Your silence is no longer a defense mechanism. Your silence is a massive, impenetrable fortress of pure authority. Your attention is an absolute, rare privilege. Your absence is a devastating crushing punishment. From this exact moment forward, your entire frequency has shifted. You operate on a plane of existence they cannot even comprehend, let alone manipulate. When they attempt to drag you into their manufactured drama, they will find nothing but a terrifying, empty void. You will watch their petty insults dissolve instantly into dust before they even reach your feet. You are completely immune to their guilt trips. You are completely blind to their fake outrage. You have ascended into a state of absolute psychological invulnerability. You are the ghost they can never catch, and the lion they must always fear. Understand exactly what will happen next. The weak individuals in your life will immediately sense this massive, terrifying shift in your energy. They will realize with creeping horror that their old manipulation tactics are completely useless against your new armor. They will absolutely panic. They will desperately escalate their toxic games. They will call you cold, arrogant, and ruthless. You will look at them with absolute, unshakable indifference. Their frantic panic is the ultimate, undeniable proof of your newly acquired sovereignty. You will let them scream into the void. You will remain entirely untouched by their desperation. Power is never simply handed over by the world. Power is violently claimed, fiercely guarded, and ruthlessly maintained. You have just been handed the most dangerous, untraceable psychological weapon in human existence. But possessing this dark knowledge without absolute, unwavering commitment is entirely useless. You must permanently burn the boats of your past. You must make a solemn, unbreakable vow to never again lower your frequency to match the desperate. You must swear to weaponize the void in every single interaction for the rest of your life. You must draw a violent line in the sand right now. If this message has ignited something primal and dangerous within you, leave a comment below with the words, "I am untouchable." Do not type those words as a simple, passive reaction. Type them as a binding, blood oath to your newly established reality. Let that sentence serve as a permanent, public marker of the exact second you completely took your power back from the world. Subscribe to this channel and like this video not to support my voice, but to physically show your absolute, unrelenting commitment to this ruthless path. You have completely transcended the pathetic rules they tried to force upon you. You are no longer a piece being pushed around on their meaningless board. You are the invisible hand that moves the entire game. The era of your submission is completely erased from history. Your reign begins now. Go forth and be untouchable,